What are we even seeing here? Why is this happening? What I do know is that the narrative of the dating man is narrative.
It's a hell of a drug.
It's a hell of a drug. One of my favorite drugs of deviancy. So, let's pour some tea and discuss my fellow fraternal filths. There's objective truth, and then there's our curated, adulterated, and often utterly unrecognizably mutated versions of that story. I know you're fantastic at the latter. Heartbreaker. We mitigate who we are around others, so they'll appreciate us more. Victors write history books to contextualize a people's actions as righteous, justified. Far too often, we take an individual's self-reported account as fact, assuming positive intent. But because we have this nature, it incentivizes the self-reporters to find a way to silence their contrarians. Our brain can change the story autonomically in cases of PTSD to try to save us from the deepest depths of the trauma we've faced. When we apply these edits manually, we can be too fair and kind when we have acted anything but. Or we can be cruel and belittling to ourselves when we truly deserved better. Which editor are you? Let me know in the comments below. Alchemy was a hell of a drug. Oh shit, he went there. Such a great, classical, and classy example of controlling a narrative in response to controlling a narrative. At the turn of the 14th century, that's right, we're going back to the golden age of S&M. Thumb screws, forgive me, harder, father, and, you know, windmills and mechanical clocks. At this time, the King of France, Philip the Fair, decided he would be anything but. In 1306, after doing a few macroeconomic crimes, Phil took refuge with the former Knights of the Temple of Jerusalem, a prominent order of religious... what the heck were these guys? They started as protectors and liberators in the Crusade place at the Crusade times. Then when they got older and moved back to France, they did a banking, which was probably a colorful business, what with King Phil criming up the money. They also had a secret philosophy that contradicted the Pope, and super stick a fork in that one for later, okay? So, Phil needed a place to crash, but the Knights loved him only about as much as anyone else. So instead of letting him mooch on a couch for free, they set him up with an Airbnb. Philip and his posse pretty much partied like it was $12.99. Like the rock stars they most certainly weren't, and drank up a huge tab. Phil also got a look at the place, and he got all Looney Tunes frustrated incel wolf at all that Templar wealth. What's the best way to avoid a debt collector? Don't pick up the phone. Don't answer your door. And if you're the king of France in the golden age of S&M, accuse the lender of crimes against God and all that is holy. This became the narrative. Christ deniers, urinating on the crucifix, sex crimes and idolatry. Honestly, sounds like a fun club. Too bad it was all made up. And though the Templars refused to confess to the trumped-up charges, some racks and thumbscrews encouraged confessions like you wouldn't believe. Seriously, you wouldn't believe them. And though a priest named Pierre de Bologna fought the quite modern philosophy that torture renders confession inadmissible, then they were able to inquisition his defense team too. And though the Bishop of Rome didn't like it, Phil found a new bishop who did. 1314 rolled in, and the last master of the order, Jacques de Molay, then a 70-year-old man, renounced his life by renouncing his confessions. They burned him at the stake for not following their narrative. In that erosion, it became a lot easier to get the rest of the Templars to trade integrity for a chance to live the rest of their years.
But why would they want to? Why not use the martyr's death to send a message? Because they had that aforementioned, contrary to the Pope, secret philosophy. And it needed to survive somehow.
It only took about 7 generations to see those ideas resurface mainstream through a cousin organization to the Templars, the Hospitallers, and through a man, Theophrastus von Hohenheim, who used his proficiency with research and medicine to codify the narrative.
That's a mouthful.
You, sir, are a mouthful. Because you know, those pesky mainstream religious ideas were still out there, and de Molay's smoke still sat heavy in the air. This is where alchemy took a second meaning. The studies and movements toward scientific fact that had existed long before Theo and continued long after were the true roots to chemistry, medicine, and hard sciences, and Theo did his part there too, helping along research in antisepsis, germ theory, toxicology, and debunking myriad harmful folk treatments. But this cat also taught the Templar stuff, like self-purification of the soul, which theory made the Catholic Church burn with anger. But he snuck it in as discussions of transmuting lead into gold. Yep. All those stories you heard about alchemists being quacks didn't factor in the entire secret narrative of teaching a religion contrary to the mainstream, hidden in chemical formulae, intended to confuse the lay Catholic away from another hate crime. The Templars had a narrative of fighting for God to mask their secret narrative teaching. Philip the Fair had a narrative of Templar sacrilege to get out of debt. And the first alchemists had a narrative of nerding out on theoretical chemistry to evade the Templars' fate.
There are many far less grand reasons to construct a narrative, and the most common of these is love. That's right. Even a degenerate like me knows a thing or two about romance, but especially the art of crafting its effigy in your own image in order to lure and befuddle unsuspecting maids like flies to the velvety embrace of a flytrap's mole. Sadly, but to the credit of my conscience, I was the fly. One day, filthlings, I will tell you that story. A study by Xixian Su and Haibo Hu in 2019 explores the disparities between heterosexual cis men and women in dating app practices. And frankly, you can see a problem emerging. Several premises seem to be supported by the data. Women and men both care about popularity, but women prefer men with higher activity and engagement. And men are indifferent. Women and men both look for attributes that suit their tastes, but women prefer men where the attributes are better matched to the man's tastes. Men are indifferent. Women value men based on socioeconomic status. Men are indifferent. Women are more enthusiastic and confident in dating with better socioeconomic status. Men are indifferent. Women tend to engage with men close to their own popularity status, with preference towards men who are more popular. Men are indifferent. What are we even seeing here? Why is this happening? I don't have those answers. I'm legitimately asking. Because I didn't expect to learn these trends while concocting an essay on narrative for you. If you have a clue, let me know in the comments. What I do know is that the narrative of the dating man is one that is going through a wild era. With 3 men to every 1 woman in your average dating app, it's no wonder that narratives like Neil Strauss's The Game are resurging. And red pill communities focus so much on what sort of man a man should create of himself to increase his attractiveness to women, which in turn encourages some men who find adopting the narrative difficult to fabricate the narrative. The popularity of masculinity, the likes of the recently cancelled Emery Andrew Tate III, is evidence of a movement of men and boys who feel disenfranchised with being authentic, pursuing their own interests, or setting high standards for their future partner's development, success, or depth, all in the interest of maximizing their chance to be with literally anyone. Tate's popularity is also evidence contrary to a narrative that our society has shouldered for a while recently, namely, that men are ubiquitously as valued as women for their emotions, their self-expression, and their freedom to do what they want with their lives. Just like the bigot womanizer macho man that we all know is a tired, aging, and hopefully soon dying trope and cliche, there's an insidious streak of women out there who prefer the stoic man who bottles his emotions, the man in uniform, the man who leaves the house to provide by making good, stable money at a good, stable career. Poor men, right? Masters of epics long patriarchy, holders of wealth and power in most societies, and most that don't even put on makeup in the morning. There are many ways in which we are not done adjusting the power imbalance that favored men for far too long. But I wanted to bring up these narrative issues because they make for spicy terrain to navigate as we continue to hone a more perfect definition of equality. While equality is still a struggle in so much of the world, at least it's a struggle and not a fairy tale. The recent struggles in Ukraine, which I'm certain are being covered by more expert professional YouTubers than your humble host, reminded me of another time and place on our planet. Ireland used to be an entirely, mostly independent island with principalities and chieftains in the 12th to 16th centuries, with a ceremonial lord in England ruling de facto, but barely. In 1533, it wasn't even certain a lord had power over the area because Henry VIII, made a religion to narrate a world in which the acts he decided to participate in were righteous. Bruh. That makes popes mad. And when popes get mad, they get excommunicated. England still had their eyes on their neighbor though, and since their administrative strength was isolated to basically just the Pale, they needed something bigger than a questionable feudalism to justify invasion. Enter capitalism. Okay, first, there was an attempt to make like the Mongols and conquer, redistribute, and establish local beloved leaders who were actually loyal to the Crown of England. But when that didn't fly, the plantation system was started in earnest in 1556, with Offaly and Laois renamed to Kings County and Queen's County, respectively. Merchants backed by Scots mercenaries took over the land, armed with the premise, the narrative, that people of the island were primitive, uncivilized, and in need of guidance. You know, the Spanish missions in the New World narrative, the apartheid narrative, the Uyghur narrative. Yikes. This one gets some mileage. And now, the beauty of the laws that exist today, that enterprise on those plantation times, is that they ask the population of Northern Ireland to determine for themselves if they belong with Ireland or the UK. The population. Those people that are predominantly descendants of the invaders, with historic ties to the UK. But demographics are a funny thing, and trends do point to facts that no one is arguing over. In a poll by the Irish Independent and Kantar, the majorities of both Irish and Northern Irish believe that the island will be unified within their lifetime, regardless of whether they wish for this or not. Of particular concern to both parties is the cost involved, as taxes would be expected to rise to fund the endeavor. The fact is, Irish, in particular Irish Catholics, are outpacing the population of loyalist Northern Irish, whose predecessors were planted here in the 16th century. Here, the 1930 papal doctrine of casti connubii, which more or less prohibited use of contraception for the Catholics, seems to have been winning the narrative for a united Ireland. Think on your own narratives. Are you always the center of your own story? The villain? The Mary Sue who knows everything and can do no wrong? Sometime soon, I'll share with you the most recent narrative I heard about myself. I'm quite grateful that usually no one talks about me. But, as such, it's poignant when someone deems me worthy. So I'll indulge in a bit of self-centered dishing. But that's a tale for another day. In the meantime, my ghosts, a special thank you to my Twitch subscribers who propelled me back into YouTubing again. It feels good. It really does. Please continue to try. And if you are safe, fed, and loved, make sure someone out there is too. Please.
Deep thanks to my current supporters, Ami Chibi, Tadano, Greg, Chaos with a K, Cass, Chaotic, Kit, both Kitties, Law, Lost, Mac, Momo, Nico, Onyx, Pika Mika, Spotted, my beloved editor, Rush, G.I. Joe, Sprocket, Gazelle, my wife, Toddy, and XNet. If you'd like your name in credits and help me claw my way back into partnership with this lovely venue YouTube, become a patron today at patreon.com/DamienHallmay.
You're good.
Are you good?
I don't know. It's always when I have to not scratch or not move or do something consistent.
It's okay, I'm just falling out of a hatch.
That's a whole thing, isn't it?
So ready. I'm so ready for it. Let me close the face.
Women in Ben. Ben? Who's Ben? Who's Ben? What a slog to read. Cracked all your cracks. Professional YouTubers. Expert. And Ernie. Professional YouTubers.
You good?
No.
Because you look like an old fisher dying off his boat.
Good. Jesus fucking Christ, how long is this one pot?